Welcome to Commissioner's Corner. I'm your host, Lois Leonard, and thank you for joining us today. Boston is the birthplace of education and is full of young people with great potential. But as the new school year begins, they're faced with challenges unlike any before in recent history. It's our duty, the community, relatives, and professionals, to rise to the challenge and give them every opportunity possible. So with us today is Boston School Superintendent Dr. Brenda Cassellius to discuss the needs, changes, and expectations of this unprecedented year. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, especially right now with schools just getting ready to open. And I'd like to start off by saying congratulations. You celebrated an anniversary with the Boston school system just a little over a year ago, right?
I did. It's my pleasure to be serving the Boston Public Schools.
Well, I know very, very much time, energy, consideration went into the decision making of how our schools were going to reopen. Can you tell us what factors stood out for you when you had to make this decision?
Well, this was a really hard decision to make, but it was really a family choice and really trying to honor our families and what was going to work for their circumstance. And then also students with high needs and being able to get them back into our buildings as soon as possible. And the third is really around the science and the numbers of positivity rate within Boston and the area, allowing us to be able to do in person and watching that very closely.
Well, let's go over it for everyone. Remote learning, hybrid, where do we start? How is it going to be executed?
Well, so we are going to offer in-person learning to our students who are highest need October 1st. Everybody will start on the 21st remotely for about 2 weeks, and then we'll have our highest need students come October 1st, and then we'll wait 2 weeks after that and begin to bring back our K0, K1 and K2 students. Those are our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Give the little ones a little bit of a chance. Plus, the science says that they're less likely to spread the disease. And then take another 2 weeks to really look into how students are doing and be able to add back our intermediate grades and then our high school after that, so that all students will be back prior to Thanksgiving break.
So, if I understand correctly, September 21st is when everyone will start, but that will be 100% remote to begin, correct?
That is correct. And that will give our teachers the time to practice, to ensure that every student is had their tech checkup, meaning that they have their computer, they have their Wi-Fi, it is working, and we have connected with every single family so that they're ready. One thing we learned this past spring was that teachers needed more time to prep and be prepared for remote learning, and what that will look like in the design of their lessons so that students stay engaged. And the second piece was, as parents become a student's first teacher, how do we support our families in order to make sure that they know how to get onto the Zoom or get into the digital backpack or communicate directly with teachers.
So prior to September 21st, there are things that students can do as well to get ready.
Yeah, they can finish their reading lists, which is good, and their summer homework that they had. Second, they can make sure that they have a Chromebook and let us know and let their teachers know if they don't have one. We'll be doing the tech checkup. Teachers will also be doing a virtual home visit. Some of those visits may also be in person if the family requests it, and if they can do that and socially distance and be outside and visit with the family. So we have a protocol that we're working with our teachers union on around home visiting. And then also students can get prepared by connecting with their peers and checking their schedules and making sure that they're ready to come back and begin school.
So, but once all remote ends, they do have a choice to be included in hybrid learning. Can you explain how what that's gonna look like, and how those children and families make those choices?
So we have a survey out now asking families what their choice is, and we've had a really good response rate for families choosing whether they want hybrid or whether they want all remote. And so we are asking our families to let us know as soon as they possibly can. And then those families that haven't let us know yet, we are calling them and we're asking principals and teachers to help us connect with every single family so that there's no stone unturned and every student is expressing their desire for remote. Of course, families always have the option to be all remote. So there are families that will go all school year, all remote. And then we have about 40 to 50% of our families who are choosing an in-person 2 days a week, where they will come and then 3 days a week they will be at home doing their remote learning. We'll have two groups, Group A and Group B, so that the groups don't mix. And we'll clean on Wednesdays between the two groups and on weekends as well. And so that's how we plan on doing the hybrid learning.
So students can either choose to be a part of the Group A, which would be Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, of course, no one will be going to schools as you clean the schools. And then on Thursday and Friday, Group B. And they stay in those groups around this and be around the same students all the time.
That is correct.
Okay, and they do have your plan seems to be rather flexible, which is wonderful for everyone. They also have the choice to change their minds, right? And go to all remote or go to hybrid if they hadn't picked that in the first place?
Yeah, it's always easier to go to all remote than it is to come back in hybrid. So if families are wanting to be in hybrid, they think at some point they should choose that now as their option. But they'll probably have another opportunity. We will make exceptions for those students who are high need, who did choose all remote and want to go back to hybrid. But for other families, it's likely that it will happen at the end of the grading period.
So for those students who are going to have the option to begin hybrid learning in early October, October 1, who are considered our most vulnerable that will be considered for that early opening?
Well, we have several therapeutic day schools where students who are medically fragile or have significant learning needs, they will be back. There's also a group of students who are placed in substantially separate classrooms and need a lot of support from multiple staff members in order to progress and meet their goals. And those students will be coming back. We also have English language learners who are new to country in levels 1 and 2 who will be invited back. And those students who are also involved with social services, who maybe we believe may need some additional support or out of the home support, homeless students, they'll be invited as well.
Right. And let's talk about transportation for just a moment. Will things look the same as they did last year with the yellow buses and the MBTA transportation?
Well, hopefully they don't look the same, because last year buses didn't get there on time.
Okay.
That's kind of been a yearly concern for us. And I actually hired a consultant this past year to get our buses running on time this year. And so this is disappointing that we're not going to be able to implement a lot of those recommendations because of the phase-in and because of the way we're doing it. However, I do think that phasing them in is going to allow for us to run our buses and get our buses running more efficiently, because we have to also account for less students on the bus because they have to socially distance. There's only one student allowed per bench. And so it's really important that we are staying up on those guidelines, cleaning between our routes and making sure that kids get to school safely and on time.
And last year also, we have a free meals program. Will we be continuing with that?
Well, that is dependent upon the USDA. So, of course, students will always get free meals when they come to school. But what's complicating the matter is that we have a summer feeding opportunity through the USDA, where during the summers we are able to feed multiple meals to students. Parents can come up and pick up their meals for students. We can feed all of Boston's children, not just Boston Public School students. And this flexibility has allowed us to feed over 1.5 million meals to our students, also to do door-to-door delivery. But if the USDA does not give us this flexibility and this waiver moving forward, meals will have to be served in school, only to school students during, it's called congregate feeding, and they'll have to be in school to get those meals, and we won't be able to send multiple meals home to children, and parents won't be able to come pick up those meals who are remote. So this is highly problematic that the USDA is playing around with food security for our poorest children. It's very disappointing, and I'm doing everything I can. The mayor's written a letter. We've talked to our state delegation about it as well, and putting pressure on the USDA secretary to issue this waiver now so that school districts can serve our neediest children and make sure that they have food.
So for updates on how that program is moving forward, we can log on to your website and get updated information.
We don't have updated
available
the waiver because that's kind of just technical back of the napkin, but we will be definitely communicating with our families, as will the city of Boston, about how they can access food if families need opportunities. Also, the PEBT cards, which are cards that we sent out to families with children so that they could access groceries and other necessities for their families. The USDA has not guaranteed that those will also be available going forward. And this is also problematic to the food security of our families. As families are experiencing unemployment at the highest rates that we've seen in a long time, this is not the time for the federal government to be loosening and playing politics with food security for our neediest children and our neediest families.
Thank you. Thanks for that information. Very important. I know that this past spring, it was discovered that a certain impediment to remote learning can be access. How are those without laptops or internet service, how will they be helped this semester?
Well, the wonderful thing is the mayor has put together a digital equity fund. So we are going to be providing hotspots to our families. Comcast Internet Essentials has expanded their a program to our neediest families through December 31st. We're hoping that will continue to expand as we go through the school year. Also, we have offered opportunities through our housing department to be able to work with them and their connectivity and making sure that the Wi-Fi is available there, and our homeless students, making sure that they have Wi-Fi. And that's the biggest issue, is the connectedness. We're also ramping up our multilingual support to families so that they, because what we found was families could access the modem through Comcast or whatever, but then they didn't know how to turn it on. So we're making sure that they have tech support in order to get connected that way. And that's one of the biggest barriers. And that's why we're doing this tech checkup before September 21st for all of our students.
And in fact, the mayor has given you his full support, of course. And so right now, I would like to take just a few seconds and let's hear from the mayor and his commitment.
We will continue the work that we began before COVID-19 even happened, closing the opportunity and achievement gaps, giving every single child the quality education that they deserve. The one thing I think I can say safely about all of us here, sometimes we might have different ways of getting to a goal, but we all believe in this. We all believe in making Boston Public Schools the greatest urban district in the country.
Doctor, those are great words coming from the mayor. How do you feel about his support?
I just feel really blessed as a superintendent to have so much support from the mayor and really the city council and the entire cabinet. We have been supported through this COVID-19 crisis immensely by the mayor and by the cabinet members, especially Chief Martinez and others who have just been tremendously supportive. I'm also supportive of his $100 million commitment to the children of Boston Public Schools over the next 3 years. This is going to allow us to really become the district that the mayor has envisioned as really one of the top districts in the nation with our new 5-year strategic plan.
Well, the challenges that we are faced with, obviously, due to COVID, they're going to continue. They're not, they're a reality. We're living with it today. And I'm sure it's distracting from actual learning. How are you and your teachers going to rise above this distraction?
Well, the hardest thing is the impact on students and teachers' mental health and anxiety levels. There's a lot of fear out there, and I completely understand that this is scary. It's also a really uncertain time for teachers because, they weren't trained to teach in these kinds of conditions. We weren't a one-to-one school district, meaning we didn't have one-to-one technology, every student having a laptop before. So we didn't integrate technology a lot in our lessons here in Boston Public Schools. So they are learning all of this brand new. And so, ramping up to that new way to do business is really hard. And I completely understand it. They also have personal lives that are impacted. Some of them are compromised, have compromising health conditions, or family members with compromising health conditions, or childcare barriers. And so I understand fully the anxieties that they feel with returning to work, as well as the students and their own mental health. So many of them want to come back and just hug their friends and hang out and do all things with with athletics and co-curricular activities, and our incoming seniors want to have a senior year. All of this is just really disappointing and anxiety creating. So what we've done to really prepare is we've added social workers, we've added family liaisons to our teams. We've put in place a student support team process so that kids who are experiencing trauma or difficulty are able to get and access the supports that they need for their mental health. This past spring, we did 14,000 sessions with students around their mental health. And then for our adults, we're working on Adult Sell Well. What that is their own social emotional learning for adults, and trying to meet them where they are and provide support to our adults as well.
Our teachers, there's a lot of concern of their, on the battlefront. How do you think their morale is?
Well, I would say that it's probably low right now. If I go by my own feelings, to be truthful, this is hard. This is really hard work. None of us has done this before. We're working harder than we've ever worked before. I mean, I literally work 12 to 14-hour days every single day. It's just never ending. And you go from one Zoom to the next Zoom to the next Zoom. And you're trying to learn a whole new craft. And I'm sure that one, there are bright spots being able to do it, but two, I think the bigger thing is you're trying to do it through a screen rather than being connected. And we're all, educators are used to working in teams. They're used to being together. They're used to getting a lot of validation from children who they love. And, it can be rather lonely through the screen, and it's hard to keep those relationships going in this new normal that we're in. And so it's really relearning a whole new way of doing the work in a joyful way where we all thrive, and finding new practices and new routines to our work. And so that's just going to take some time. And that's why it's so important for us to focus on our adults as well. And take care of them so that's why I'm anxious to get them back into the school buildings, and start having these face-to-face conversations safely, of course, with the mask, with the social distancing, and outdoors as much as possible.
So the support of the teachers with other teachers is incredibly important as they join together through this. Doctor, many of our young people, they joined in the protests this summer that were fueled by the death of George Floyd. And for most, I would imagine it was their very first exposure to this kind of high emotion. So I'm wondering, especially with the older children, how might you and your teachers handle the conversations and the fallout that will spill over into the classroom, whether it be remote or hybrid?
So I've been blessed that I meet with my Boston Student Advisory Council just about every week on Thursdays, and it has been wonderful. I started meeting with them after the pandemic. I mean, I was meeting with them regularly through the school year, but more weekly during the pandemic to get their feedback, to keep a pulse on the student population and see how they were doing. There's one representative from every high school on the Student Advisory Council. And so this has given me a lot of ideas and solutions for how to keep them engaged. One was through the youth jobs. This summer, we did several different workarounds, I kind of say, to have them work remotely, to have them be engaged in small groups. BPS also had positions that we participated with the city on and their Youth Works program this summer, which was really successful to keep so many of our youth engaged, which was really, really important. And so as we move forward into the school year, it's going to be even more important that we stay connected to our youth and that we are providing the mental health services and the opportunities for connectedness with their peers and with their teachers, so that there's a strong sense of community and a strong sense of connectedness to the school community.
Dr. The mayor has put a lot of emphasis this year. We've all put a lot of emphasis this year on inequities that are occurring in our city. How do you think the inequities and perhaps the systemic barriers that have affected the success of the Boston school system and its children in the past?
Well, we know that these inequities existed prior to COVID. And what's happened now since COVID is that it's really brought them to light. And so, the conversation we were having earlier around food access, people don't typically think of food access as, a huge issue for our families. And it is actually a very big issue for so many of our children and their families. And housing as another big issue. All of these things matter because that goes into whether children are stable and can think clearly when they come to school and really focus on their education once they come to us. And so we've really taken on the responsibility through our full service community schools initiative and our hub school initiative to provide supports and wraparound services to our families by adding social workers, adding family liaisons, really looking how we partner with our outside nonprofit organizations to support families and to support our students in their learning, and also supporting their families. Because no matter how you cut the data, these inequities across the city, disproportionately impact our Black and Brown and Asian families more negatively than they do our more privileged community members.
Well, let's talk about the future. You've prepared a strategic vision for Boston. It was recently approved by the school committee. What are the top priorities?
Well, the first one is something you don't typically find in a strategic plan for a school district, and that is to cultivate trust with our community. Because when I came into Boston Public Schools, that was something that as I went to visit all 125 schools, held over 120 individual and community-wide town hall meetings and parent council meetings, I was told that, we just don't trust the district. And so really focusing on that at the central office and at the school level was something that we've really tackled. So part of that is training for our parent councils. And then we instituted over this past spring, equity roundtables. And that's a way that we can begin to be transparent with our public, share data on data dashboards, make sure that people are aware of our decision making, engage them. I had over 60 different and my team had over 60 different engagements for this reopening plan. And so that will help to cultivate the trust. The second is to really focus on equity, to ensure that we're lifting up the inequities and that we are mitigating those and addressing those head on with an anti-racist lens, both our policies and our practices, as we begin to really lean into providing a better and more excellent equitable education for our students. And then the third priority, I would say, is really around accelerating learning, which is around, the adding of these pathways, K-6, and then our high school pathways, and really ramping up our high school work so that all students have an excellent high school experience in the future. So that's part of the plan moving forward. And of course, now with COVID, our facilities are really old. The mayor had his huge commitment with Build PPS several years ago to address it. We have addressed it now this past year in our capital request around adding in water over the next 3 years, potable water. So our students will have clean water in every school building over the next 3 years, as well as this year we're adding 7,000 new windows to our schools. So that work is now going on with a new urgency, and then upgrade of our bathrooms, toilets, faucets, sinks, and getting the venting and making sure that those are adequate and clean.
Well, I Thank you. Can't thank you enough. I'm thinking of this very first year that you've just spent with the Boston school system, and hoping that the next year is bright. And welcome to Boston. Maybe a year late, but thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the conversation. And good luck. Good luck in the new school year.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
See you next time. Thank you. And thank you, our viewers, for watching. We all have the same hopes and wishes for our young people, and their success is a reflection on us. So let's take on this responsibility, both at home and by supporting their teachers. The next few months will go by quickly. Let's make the most of them. I'm Lois Leonard, and we'll see you next time on Commissioner's Corner.